I never thought anything strange was happening in my apartment. For almost a year, it was just a normal place to live, a small apartment. Quiet neighbors, nothing unusual, until one night. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of someone walking slowly in the hallway outside my door. The strange thing was, I lived on the top floor, and nobody was supposed to be there. I moved into my apartment during the summer. It wasn't the nicest place in the city, but it was affordable, close to my job, and honestly, I didn't expect much from it. The building was old. The elevators were slow. The walls were thin. But after a few weeks, I got used to it. Most of my neighbors were quiet. I rarely saw anyone in the hallway. The only thing I noticed was that the apartment across from mine always had its door closed. I never saw the person who lived there. I just assumed they were private. For months, everything was normal, until I started hearing strange noises at night. At first, it was small things. A door closing somewhere, footsteps above me, someone moving furniture. I ignored it because old buildings always make noises. But then I realized something. The noises were always coming from the hallway right outside my apartment. The first time it happened, I was watching TV late at night. It was around 2 a.m. when I heard someone walking outside, slow footsteps back and forth, like someone was standing there, walking past my door repeatedly. I turned off the TV and listened. The footsteps stopped. I waited a few seconds. Then I heard 3 slow knocks, knock, knock, knock. I froze. I looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. I thought maybe someone was playing a prank. So I went back to bed, but the next night, it happened again. Same time, same footsteps, same 3 knocks. This time, I checked immediately. Still nothing. The weirdest part was that the hallway lights were turned off, but I could see a shadow underneath my door. Someone was standing right outside. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. After almost a minute, the shadow slowly disappeared. I waited until morning before opening my door. When I stepped outside, I noticed something strange. There were no footprints, nothing, but on my doormat. There was a small piece of paper. I picked it up. It only had 1 sentence written on it. "Why did you come back?" I had no idea what it meant. I had never lived there before. I threw the paper away and tried to forget about it. A few days passed, then I met one of my neighbors in the elevator. I finally asked him about the apartment across from mine. He looked confused, then he asked which apartment. I pointed at the door. He stared at it for a few seconds. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "That apartment has been empty for almost 2 years. I laughed because I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He told me the previous tenant disappeared. Nobody knew exactly what happened. The apartment was locked, and the landlord never rented it again. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the footsteps, the knocks, and the note. At around 3 a.m., I heard them again. But this time, something was different. The footsteps weren't walking past my door. They stopped directly in front of it. Then I heard a whisper, very quiet. Almost impossible to hear, but I heard it. It said, "Open the door." I grabbed my phone and called the police. When they arrived, they checked the hallway. Nobody was there. But when they checked the empty apartment across from mine, the door was unlocked. Inside, there was nothing. No furniture, no belongings, nothing except an old photograph sitting on the floor. The officer picked it up, then he looked at me, and his expression changed. Because the picture showed the hallway, my apartment door, and a person standing outside it. The picture was dated 3 days before I moved in. I moved out the next morning. I never found out who was leaving those notes, or who was standing outside my door every night, but I still think about one thing. If that apartment was empty for 2 years, who was knocking? After that night, I started paying more attention to the people living in the building. I wanted to know if anyone else had heard the same thing. A few days later, I saw an older man from the second floor checking his mailbox. I casually asked him if he ever heard noises coming from the top floor at night. The moment I mentioned the footsteps, his face changed. He looked around the hallway before answering. Then he quietly said, "Don't stand near that door after midnight." I asked him why. At first, he didn't want to talk about it. But after a few seconds, he told me something strange. He said that years ago, the apartment across from mine belonged to a man who lived alone. Nobody knew much about him. He rarely talked to anyone. But neighbors often complained about hearing him argue with someone inside his apartment. The strange part was, everyone knew he lived alone. One night, people in the building heard a loud argument coming from his apartment. Then they heard a door slam. After that, silence. The next morning, the apartment was empty. The man was gone. No one knew where he went. The landlord changed the locks, but the apartment stayed empty. The old neighbor told me something else that made me uncomfortable. He said, "You're not the first person to complain about someone knocking on that door." I asked him what he meant. He just looked at me and said every person who lived near that apartment eventually heard the same thing. I didn't know what to say after hearing that. For the first time, I realized that maybe I wasn't the only person who had experienced this. I asked him why nobody told me about it before. He looked at me and said, "Because nobody wants to believe something they can't explain." Then he walked away. That night, I decided to do something different. I placed my phone outside my apartment door and started recording before going to sleep. I wanted proof. I wanted to know if I was imagining everything. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke up. Not because of the footsteps, but because my phone started playing a notification sound. I grabbed it and checked the recording. At first, everything was normal. Just silence. Then, after a few minutes, I heard the footsteps, slow, careful, walking closer and closer to my door. Then came the 3 knocks, knock, knock, knock. I felt my entire body freeze. But then something happened that I didn't expect. After the knocks, the recording captured a voice. A voice I didn't hear that night. It was quiet, almost like someone was whispering directly into the microphone. The voice said, "You're still here." I replayed it several times. I was sure I had never heard that voice before. The next morning, I showed the recording to my neighbor. He listened quietly, but when the whisper played, his face turned pale. He asked me one question, "Did you open your door?" I told him no. Then he looked at me and said, "Good." I asked him why. He pointed toward the empty apartment across from mine. Then he said, "The last person who opened that door never came back. After that, I didn't wait anymore. I packed my things and left the apartment the same day. I never returned." Months later, I tried searching for information about the old tenant. I found an article about a man who disappeared from that building years ago. The article mentioned something strange before he disappeared. He told a friend that someone kept knocking on his door every night, and every time he looked through the peephole, nobody was there. But one night, he said he saw himself standing outside. I still don't know what happened in that apartment. I don't know who was knocking, or why that note said, "Why did you come back?" But I know one thing. Some places don't stay empty. Sometimes, something is still waiting inside.